Okay, to start the hour here, if I put in this equation with a $50,000 loan, $530 payments, and 7% interest, I'm going to go to the first place I need to change. Right now, what interest rate have I got in there? Can you read that? I got 10%, so I'm going to put a 0.7 here to kind of hold the place with that 0. That's 7% interest. Okay, and then I have this divided by 12. Does that make sense? Yeah, if you're doing it monthly, which is what most payments are. Then how about this one? It's got a minus. Is that good for a loan? Yes, because you want them to shrink over time. You want to pay them off. And then last but not least, $530, 530 is my payments. All right, now how do I tell if I'm doing it right? Well, I'm just going to compare my table to your table. But first I'm going to go to my table settings. See, I was going to go to the 71st spot on my table. Yeah, that wouldn't be too smart. I want to start it. Everybody get your table set up to say 1 and 1. And then go to table. And we'll see if you said 49762, then you were doing it right. Raise your hand if you had 49762. Okay, awesome. Now, does it make sense that our loan amount is going to go down slowly as we pay it off? Makes sense, right? Okay, somebody already find where it gets paid off? Usually there's some kid that looked ahead. Nobody? All right. My guess from how slow this is, it's only down 3,000 after about a year. So that's going to be quite a few years. So I'm just going to take a stab at it and go out like 50 months. And I'll go to my table then and see if I end up happening to get lucky. Usually with that many of kids out here, one of you guys will find it pretty quick. Still 36,000. Holy smokes. You know what this is like? This is like college loans. Because $50,000 is very common for people to have for your college loan payments. And 7%, that might be a little high for college loan payments. Usually your interest on college loans is a little lower. But if you got it from a normal bank, it might be that high. All right, so I'm going to go out 10 years, which will be 120 months, and I'm going to see if it's paid off by then. I bet it is. Somebody by now probably has found it. Thank you. 138 apparently. I'm going to go to 135 just so I can see the last few before it pays off. Table. Now the last thing I need to teach you is this. How can we decide ahead of time when we're going to get it paid off? Because most loans are not just like, okay, just keep paying us until we're paid off. It's usually like a 7-year loan or a 10-year loan or a 30-year loan. You get what I mean? Like we usually have been letting you just pick a payment, or we tell you a payment, and then we see when it happens to get paid off. And in this case, it was 138 months later. All right, so let's just make sure we use this right. Okay, so I'm going to arrow onto this number because I want to know to the penny, because today's homework, it's all to the penny. Everybody get onto that 138th spot and notice it's actually 314.4016, etc. So if we're going to do it to the penny, 314.40. All right, that's what they owe us back. We made 138 payments times $530, and we're going to figure out what that is. I'm going to pause while I find that one. Okay, could you have done that? Because that's the typical test question up to today, is how much total did we pay? We paid $73,140 by doing $530 payments 138 times. Why do I have them giving me money back? Because I overpaid them. My last payment was more than it had to be, so that they owed me money back. When I paid them the $530 at the end, it was like more than they needed to get me paid up. So that's why we had to subtract this, and then this number, it confuses people sometimes because they're like, didn't we borrow 50? Yeah, but you had to pay back more because of interest. So if you wanted to know exactly how much interest there was, you'd take that number and subtract 50,000. And I can do that in my head pretty easy. I bet you could too. $22,825.60. Do you see why there's some guy sitting at a bank that really wants to give you a car loan or a student loan? Because they make money. And it's not wrong for them to make money. I mean, if they weren't willing to lend you the money, then you couldn't go to school or get that car or buy that house. But they're going to make money too. So, all right. Now, in the real world, we actually don't just let people pick their payment. We actually have a 30-year loan or a 15-year loan or a 10-year loan. And here's what's normal. For cars, the most common loan is a 5-year loan, but it is going up lately because cars are getting more expensive and people like to have like smaller payments, and so they'll oftentimes get a 6 or a 7-year loan. That's really a long time to pay off a car. That means they make even more interest because you're paying interest for longer. So 5 years is normal, but it's not super uncommon to have a longer loan than that. So how could we figure out what the payments should have been to make this a 5-year loan? Assume for a moment it was a car loan. You were buying a $50,000 car. That's not that crazy. 35 is the average car. There's a lot of $50,000 cars out there. You're not going to have the same payment because this one, it took us a pretty long time, 138 payments. So if we wanted this to be a 5-year loan, the next tool I want to show you comes into play. Are you ready? Everybody hit the button called apps. For some of you, it's like a pink color, I've noticed, but I'll make it red on the screen here. Apps. See that one? Apps. Now, of the apps, the very first one I would list would be my best one. They did. Their finance apps are the ones that are used the most. And then I'm going to hit enter. And now, if I had a really good finance app, the best one, I would put it at the top. That's what we're using as the top one. TVM Solver. Hit enter. Looks like this. Okay, so here's how you use it. The TVM stands for time value of money. I want you to get to understand why money has a time value. Let's say you borrow $100 from me, and I say, okay, I'll lend you $100. And then a few days later, I'm like, so when might you be able to give me $100 back? And you say, I'll get it to you in 50 years. Wouldn't that be like an insult? Like, what? Okay. Now, what if we made a business deal that said, I'll give you actually $400 back, but I want 50 years to pay it off? We could make a business deal like that, but that would reflect that the money has time value. You can't just borrow $100 and then give it back 10 or 20 or 100 years later. You just can't do that because money has a time value. What's better, $100 now or $100 later? Now. Okay. Because you can do something with your $100 now. Okay, and you have to wait. That's worth. So what if I had this deal? You borrow $100 from me, and you say, Mr. Server, could I wait a year to pay it back and give you $120? A lot of people would say, yeah, okay, I'll take that deal, because they just got 20% interest. See what I mean? Okay, so that's what a bank does too. They're like, yeah, I'll give you the money now, and you give me back later, but you got to give me more back later. And that's what just happened here with this car loan. Okay, so anyway, this reflects the TVM, time value of money. All right, so let's do this same problem, except I said we wanted it to be 5 years. So N is how many payments, which is 5, but not just 5, that'd be 5 payments. Nobody does that. It'd be 5 years times what? And you don't have to do that in your head. Look, you can type 5 times 12. It is a calculator after all. Hit enter and it'll do 60. That's a 5-year loan. So you just go, 5 times 12. So N is 60. That's 60 payments. Our interest, we'll just use the same numbers we had before, 7%. So I'm hitting a 7 here. Not a 0.07. It says a percent sign. So you give a whole number. Like 7% is 7. If it was 7.5, you go 7.5. All right. The present value, that's the value of either you're investing some money, it's called the principal, or you're borrowing some money. In this case, it was borrowing $50,000. Everybody put a $50,000 there. And mine already has a payment in there. Yours might have 0 in there because you might not have ever used this app before. Whatever anybody used last is the last number that's in there. Okay. I'm going to make my payments, well, I don't know. That's what this app will do, is it'll tell you what the payment should be. And I'll show you how to solve for that in a second because we got to go change 2 more things. See how it says FV equals 0? Take a wild guess from what I was saying. The name of the TVM was time value of money. What do you think FV stands for? What does it feel like? The what? Final value. That's a pretty good guess. It's actually officially called future value, but final value is pretty close. Okay, the future value is 0, and it is 0. What? Don't you want the value of the loan to be 0 at the end? You've got it all paid off. That makes sense? You don't want to just partially pay it off. You want to get it all paid off. So your future value is 0, and then this should be a 12. Why? Because that's P/Y. You think it's pickles per year? What do you think it is? Payments per year. Okay. All right, and then C/Y, it'll always be the same unless you change it. Leave it alone. We're going to always have payments and compounding be the same. All right, and then this payment at end or beginning, does it actually make any difference, do you think, if you make your payments on your house at the end of the month that you owe them money or the beginning of the month? Do you think it would make a difference? It does. That's why we have this selector. Okay, and I think almost everybody has it on end right now. Would you verify if yours is on end? Raise your hand if yours is on end. Okay, that means it defaults to that, so that's what we're going to use. You're making your payments at the end of the month. Do you get if you make your payments at the beginning of the month, you paid them just a little bit earlier, and therefore there's some time value to the money. It's actually a little better. You'll get your loan paid off a little faster if you used beginning. But we're going to default to the end because that's what the calculator says. Okay, and last thing, everybody go up right here on the payment PMT, and we're going to do a solve. I bet you've never used solve before. You've used enter, but I bet you've never used solve. Solve says alpha. Everybody hit the alpha button, and then right on top of enter button, do you see the word solve? So you hit alpha, and then you hit enter, and that's alpha solve. And your payments would be $990. But remember, on today's, we need to go to the penny. $990.06 is what our payment should be. But wait, Mr. Server, you said before that the payments were $530. Well, that's because I just picked a number, and I didn't know when it was going to get paid off. This, we told it we want it to be 60 payments, which is 5 years. We want this thing paid off in 5 years. You'll have to pay $990 a month to make that happen. Okay, so now you're going to be using both programs like back to back. So now I went and figured out it was $990.06. Help me remember the 6 cents. I'm going to go back in here and change my payment to $990.06. Everybody do that. 990.06. Now some people are going to assume, well, it really won't matter much because you still paid off your loan. Either way you paid off your loan, so it's probably the numbers will be about the same. But do you get we paid it off quicker, which should mean we'd pay less interest. All right, so let's see that. Now let's go back to our loan, and I know which line it should be on. It should be on 60, remember? Because we 60 months. So I'm going to go to second table settings. Everybody do that. Go ahead and change your table settings to 60. Go to the table, and oftentimes, even in the real world, you're off by a month. Now in this case, it might end up being perfect, or I might have actually gotten it paid off the month before. All right, but this one was really close to being right. At 60 months, is it paid off? Yeah, it doesn't get much closer than that. They technically owe us ½ cent. They're probably not going to actually mail you that ½ cent because The postage alone will cost more than the half a cent. And besides, if it's a half a cent, I bet you anything that's less than $1, they get to just round away. All right, so how much did we actually pay? Didn't we have to make 60 payments? Yeah, so it's 60 times, what were the payments? 990 this time. So 60 times 990, and then somebody's with a sharp memory. It wasn't just 990, it was 990 and what? 06. Okay. That's $59,403. Look at the difference. What's the total we paid? Well, either way we borrowed $50,000. Either way we paid 7% interest. But do you get we paid a lot less interest? We only paid $9,000 of interest compared to last time. The total we paid was this, so then the interest part was $22,000. Would you rather pay $22,000 of interest, or would you rather pay $9,000 of interest? It's a big difference. Do you see how math can give you an advantage in the real world? If you just like bumble along and don't know how things are going to be different if you make bigger payments or whatever. $9,000 compared to almost $23,000. You could argue that that's like a $14,000 difference. You saved 14 grand. Now, granted, you had to pay it off quicker. Okay. Let's see if you really caught that. Everybody go to TVM Solver again. It's under Apps, Finance, TVM Solver. And I'm going to give you a new scenario. It's going to be a house loan. We're going to buy a nice house this time. We're going to buy a $500,000 home. $500,000 is what we're going to borrow. $500,000. We're going to make the interest rate 4% because right now you can technically get loans for less than that, but we're going to go with just 4%. So 4% loan, $500,000 principal, monthly payments. What else do I need to know? How big the payments are. Can't the machine tell me that? Yes. That's a good question. This is a home loan. Does anybody know how long home loans are? Yes? 30 years is correct. Okay, so this has got to be 30 years. 30 would be 30 months. 30 times what? 30 times 12. 360 months. 4% interest. $500,000. Payments would be, see if you remember how to do the solve thing. Hint, it involves alpha. Did you do alpha solve? There's your payments. You got about $2,000 a month in payments on the house. Now, do you remember that we told this thing to make it 360 payments? See, I don't have to go look up all that other stuff. I can assume it was 360 payments of 2387.08. Notice I rounded that at the end. Would you please go 360 times 2307.08. That's how much money you really paid for your house. And hint, it's not going to be $500,000. It's going to be a lot more because you paid interest. Would you tell me, sir, what you got with 360 times 2307.08? And 80 cents. Think about this for a second. You borrowed $500,000, but what did you actually pay? Over $800,000. Do you get that the bank made $300,000 on you buying that house? All right. You're right. Maybe you want to pay it off quicker than 30 years. That absolutely could work. But I want to show you the difference in interest rate. This is called a refi. Remember me saying, oh, let's just use 4%? What if you worked really hard at it, you found the bank that would give you the best interest, and you have really good credit, and you could get 3.5%. It's only a 0.5% difference. Everybody go into your TVM solver and make it 3.5% interest. And remember, it was $830,000 before. What if we only pay 3.5% interest instead of 4%? It'll matter. And now I'm going to go down to my payment and recalculate my payment. And first of all, I like that. My payment is lower. Doesn't everybody like having a lower monthly payment? Definitely. And then you go that times 360, 2, 2, 4, 5, 22. 2, 2, 4, 5.22. And there was 360 payments of that times 360. $808,000 instead of $830,000. That's a decent amount of money difference. $22,000? Is that right? It's about $22,000. That's like a car. All because you refied your house and got a 0.5%. But do you get a lot of people don't do the paperwork to actually, it's because it's a pain in the butt. You got to go into the bank and you got to, do a whole bunch of paperwork and stuff, and then your bank will give you these lower payments, but it could save you 22 grand. I did another example earlier today where, remember, this was only a 0.5% difference. When we did it when it was like 1.5% difference, see, some people took out their loans when the loan they could get was like 5.5%, and now they're down to 3.5%. Do you get that's a 2% difference? This was only a 0.5% difference, and it was 20 grand. There was one example in my class where it was like a $60,000 difference. All I had to do was go in and sign some papers, and you'll have lower payments for the rest of your life of your house, and you might save as much as $60,000. So, bottom line, if any of your parents have a mortgage right now, which is you're paying off the house, this month it's officially the lowest payments. It might be a tie for the lowest in history, like the lowest interest rates. Sorry. So if they were ever thinking about refining, if they were like, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, and right now, an amazingly good time to refinance your house. And then a lot of people, if you've been paying on your house for a while, you don't want to restart a 30-year mortgage. Totally understand that. So a lot of people will do a refi and switch to a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30, because it gets it paid off faster. That saves you interest. And you get a lower interest rate. That saves you interest. So a lot of people switch they're partway through their 30-year loan, and then they refi and do a 15-year loan at a lower interest rate. Plus, one more thing I haven't even mentioned, 15-year loans are always a little lower interest than a 30. So if you walk in there and say, I'd like your 15% rate, it's lower yet than a 30. So it's a lot of reasons why that would be an interesting option. So anyway, if your parents are thinking about refining, the rates this month just got really low. I don't like to sell those or anything. I'm just telling you, I read an article that there was tons of people refining right now because those rates got especially low just recently. We're talking in your lifetime, this might be the lowest rates for a house you'll ever see in your life. It's possible that could change, but it's the lowest I've ever seen in 50 years. Pretty unlikely it's going to go too much lower than this, because they're already down to 3. Just to give you perspective, my brother's first loan for his house, 13%. And then I got my loan. Back when I got my loan, the best rate I could get was 7.2. And my brother was like, man, that's so good, because he had paid 13. And then I asked my dad what his rate was way back in the day. My dad, if he was alive right now, he'd be like 90, 95. And his rate was 4%, and I was like, oh, 4%, we'll never see that again. And then now it's down to 3.5. So like it kind of goes through cycles. So way back when my dad was young and bought a house, it was like 4. Well, now it's down to like 3.5 again. But in the middle, it was like 13. So it could go up to 13 again by the time you want to buy a house. I don't know. Don't think it's likely, but it could. Okay, so let's see if you learned anything. Everybody, new scenario, you're not doing a loan. You're saving money. The TVM solver can do that too. Everybody go back to apps, finance, TVM solver, and let's save for a long time. I'll give you an example. Benjamin Franklin, the founding father, he was like a big deal out on the East Coast, and he's neither one who invented or like figured out electricity. Like he got struck by lightning while he's flying a kite or something. I think I got the right guy. Anyway, he ended up leaving a whole bunch of money to the city of Pennsylvania, but he said you can't touch it for 100 years because he wanted it to grow. And he knew 100 years it would grow a lot. Now, if you think about it, our country is like 300 years old, so it's not like that's only 100 of the 300 years that our country's been around. I know I'm rounding there, but the point is, if he could have even said, leave it in there for 300 years and see what it is, and then you can spend it. So he said, you can have this money, but not for 300 years or 100. I want to do 300 years and show you what would happen. All right. So if n is months, then 300 years would be 300, what? Times 12. Good. And let's say that we figure that we're going to get the stock market's average over the long haul. I'm going to say it's 7%. Everybody put a 7 right here. I don't know what it's going to actually be in the real world. I think we might have a stock market crash in the next 2-3 years because it's up really high and has. So I'm not saying it's going to go up forever. I'm saying average. Okay, this last year was like 10 or 12%. It depends on which fund you were in. Some of them were as high as like 20%. But I'm saying average is 7. Let's say that right this second you decided, okay, let's not say you because you don't have this much money, but let's say it's your dad, okay, and your mom and dad have decided they want to have some fund for their survivors someday. Anybody who's related to them someday will split this money. But it won't be you because it's going to be 300 years from now. The Dynasty Fund. And they put $500,000 in there right now. 500,000, so you can leave that alone. There's no payments. You're not going to have to put anything into it. So then what's the thing we don't know? What don't we know? The future value. So we go to future value and we alpha solve for that. Now this is scientific notation, which means you take the decimal and you move it over how far? 14 spots. So that 500,000 has now grown. Can you imagine how excited that family would be that it had, how many places am I supposed to move the decimal? So I get 6.2, and I want to move the decimal 14 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Putting in a decimal, that's how much money there would be. That's a good point. The burgers aren't going to cost that much, but I would agree that the burgers would be like $1,000. The value menu would be like the $1,000 value menu. I mean, we might have changed currency by then. Who knows? But there are countries, I mean, seriously, it seems silly to us to think about paying $1,000 for something, but if you go to like, let me think. My son, oh, my son has traveled in Iceland, and in Iceland you pay like $1,600, but they're like kroner or whatever they are in Iceland, and prices for things like 1,600 or 16,000 even isn't a crazy number. It's just like it's all relative to the currency. So people 300 years from now will be used to the $1,000 burger. But anyway, this would be millions, billions. Your family trust could have $620 trillion in it. But it would have to have some kind of a legal thing that some kid, like partway through, is going to be like, I'm going to figure out a way to get this money because they're going to want to spend it. And they're like, I'm not going to be alive when this thing. I want my part. So it could cause problems too. All right, let's do a little more realistic scenario. Now, this isn't totally unrealistic. It isn't. It's just long term. Like it's a thing that you'd have to like think for the long run. I'm going to give you one last example on this. It's got a little bit of a math behind it. Samurai, they're famous in Japan, right? They make bows like for archery, okay? And there are still the kind of like a lost art of making these bows, and the best wood is 100-year-old wood. So you make the bow from 100-year-old wood. So here's the thing that's kind of crazy. You get the wood all ready to go for the bow, but the bow isn't for you. The bow is for a kid like 4 or 5 generations down the road who's going to use the wood that you put up. And you, the samurai, are using the wood from your great-grandpa who set it up for you. That's long-term thinking. You aren't just like making something for yourself. This is something you're making for your great-great-grandchild kind of thing. So that's true. Samurai bow. Look it up. All right. So let's do one last, a little more maybe, I don't know, less long-term thinking. You have $2,000 saved up towards college, but you could just leave it in the bank account and be safe, and you won't get almost any interest. But let's say you want to put $2,000, not $500,000, $2,000 in your bank account, and you think as you're saving towards college, you're going to get babysitting jobs, you're going to mow lawns. I betcha you could add $100 a month to it. So we're going to make payments of 100. I don't know what the future value is. It won't be 6.2 trillion. How much I know. Let's say that you invest it, and on average you get 7% in the stock market, so we'll leave that one as 7%. It's certainly not going to be 300 years this time. So for you to use it for college might only be like, let's say 4 years. Just a 4, that'd be 4 months. So what do I do? 4 times 12. Let's see how much you have as FV. What does FV stand for? Future value. You only had 2,000, and all of a sudden, you have 8,000. Now, is that enough to pay for all your college? No. But it might be a really nice, like, spending money fund, like so that you can have money for pizza and, hanging out with your friends and going to movies and that kind of stuff. You might be able to pay a little bit towards tuition, but that wouldn't pay much tuition. Because tuition nowadays, at least $8,000 a year. Depends on where you go, but that would be really low. That's not like private college tuition. Okay, so, all right. I'm going to leave you one last question. I want you to compare this with the kid next to you to see if you really got this app down. Here's a more typical scenario that you have to do for your test on this stuff. We're going to go back to a car loan. We're going to use the average car value in the United States, which is $35,000. Everybody take out a loan for $35,000. The average interest rate for car interest is going to be about 6% nowadays. $35,000 loan, 6%, and the average length of time for a car loan, it used to be 5 years, but I think now it's 6-year loan is like the average or normal. You should be able to tell me what the payments are. Say it one more time, 7%, $35,000 car. You should be able to figure out your payments to pay it off in 6 years. Did you make future value 0? Good. Did you make it 6 times 12? All right. 12-minute warning's going off. Got to get in the homework here any minute. All right. So, alpha solve for the payment, $596.72. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, what did I say for the rate? 6%, sorry, my bad. 6%. Alpha solve here. There we go. $580. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. So, that's the typical test question that we just covered, is how to figure out exactly what the payment would be for a certain length of time for the loan. All right, so let's go do some together. Everybody find the Schoology quiz that's posted under today's date, and I will get you started in the first couple questions. Pausing. Okay, let's get started together here. I'll move my recording off the screen here and then zoom in on this a little bit. A little too much. There, right there. Okay. The frequency in which the interest compounded. Man, they make that sound complicated. How many times? 4. That one was 4. The next one, the principal. That's your starting amount, 500. Next one, the interest rate. The interest rate, I'll do this in a different color. We'll get a color theme going here. The interest rate is right there. But you can't say 0.04. What do you say? 4. Nope, just a 4 is fine. You can write a percent, but it don't have to. Okay, the next one. The payment or deposit. The payment or deposit is that. Just call it 25. Don't call it negative 25. And then, whether this model represents a loan or investment, I can tell by that negative sign right there that I'm trying to make it get smaller, which means it must have been a loan. And there, that's it for that one. Now remember, you'll have to use both what we taught you yesterday and this new program called the TVM Solver. Those two programs together to answer these questions. And then I want to sort of make you think about what we're doing on next week. It's kind of cool. We're going to ask you to figure out what you might want to be, and then we'll help you look up how much you'll make doing that. Okay, let's say you want to be an interior designer, and we want to figure out what the average salary of an interior designer is. And then you'll have some money. Do you get that you can buy different things based on how much salary you have? So if you are a barista and you make $15 an hour, you won't have as much to spend as somebody who is like got a much bigger income. So anyway, you'll be able to spend a percentage of whatever you make, because nobody can spend all of their money on a car, for example. You can't spend all your money on that. You got to eat, and you got to be able to put shelter over your head and stuff. So anyway, think about what job you might be interested in researching, and then a car that you might be interested in driving. And you don't have to take a loan for the car. There's 2 ways you do the project. You can either take a loan for the car, which usually gets you into a nicer car faster, but it's also much more expensive. Or you can save up for a car, and you might be like, well, what am I going to drive for the first couple of years? Let's imagine for a moment that you got started with an old car from mom and dad. Still works, though. You could wait, save up, and then not have to pay any interest and just buy the car. So that's the project. You could go, I want to be an engineer, I'm going to be a software engineer, and that makes this much on average, and then I can spend 15% of that on something I want to buy. I'm going to pick a car, and on the car, I actually want a new car right away because that's important to me, so I want to spend the money to do that. So then you set up the car loan and see how much it would cost. And then you might be like, well, I guess I can't buy the really expensive car because I'm not making enough money. And then you do your project adjustments till you've got it so you're buying something you can actually afford, and then you'll tell how much interest you paid and that kind of stuff. That's what the project is like. That's next week. You get to pick all those things, but be starting to think about, well, I might be interested in seeing what a nurse makes. Maybe I want to be a nurse. Maybe you want to be a doctor. Maybe you want to be a dentist. I don't know. A lot of different options out there. Okay, and that's all I have for you for the video for today.